No Miki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The No Miki Show.
Hello and welcome to the No Miki Show. I'm back. Oh, has anything changed? No? Everything is okay? World stable? Oh, okay, cool. I should have taken a longer vacation. Many of you know that I went on vacation to Cuba for 2 whole weeks. That went by so fast. Bucket list item checked off. So grateful to the Cuban people and to everybody who helped facilitate the trip. It was quite a time to be in Cuba, but in particular, I was at the Bay of Pigs, Playa Giron, the night that Putin invaded Ukraine. And, you know, I like to do this when I go to countries I've never been to. I like to bring some sort of history of political history or, history of beyond politics, anthropological history of those places. And of course, Cuba is very important. It's important to the left. It's important to geopolitics. It's important in this, what we thought was a post-Soviet-ish world. So, of course, I was in Playa Giron and Putin invaded Ukraine. And I was reading about the Bay of Pigs. And I was reading about how Fidel had to maneuver after he won the revolution against Batista. And just for folks to remember, if you don't remember, Batista was backed by a lot of mafiosos. He cut a deal to take back power after he lost power. And that's when he became autocratic. And he had the support of the mafia in New York. He cut a deal with them to open up casinos, to open up hotels, and turn Havana into the Vegas of the South. So that didn't work out great. And Fidel did successfully win the revolution. It was very hard fought. He was way over. Their revolution was outnumbered by far. They had horrifying defeats in the beginning, but he was able to win control. And of course, 60 years later, since the fall of Batista, Cuba has been able to exercise its own independence, keeping both the U.S., especially in the last few years, at an arm's length, but of course also the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union Russia. But it's been complicated. It's an extremely complicated history. And I think that is the lesson here, right? We often talk about these geopolitical hotspots in sort of black and white ways. We talk about foreign policy in black and white ways. We talk about the U.S. Foreign policy in black and white ways. We've had different foreign policy strategies since Eisenhower, or we want to go back to FDR, Cold War, early Cold War, all the way to today. Democrats have different foreign policy strategies. Republicans have had different foreign policy strategies. And I think that's kind of how we are in this situation right now on the left. We're trying to figure out who we are as a country, where we should be as a movement, as Putin has really exercised beyond his power. And we'll talk about this later on the show, whether or not he has committed war crimes. Many believe so. It's a complicated thing to assess, but this is somebody who has not justified this war in a legal way, and that by that alone is an excuse for being in a war crime. Not to mention all of the actions he's committed before and after. So on the left, I'm sitting there in Playa Giron, and I don't have access to CNN or the typical news, which could be good, but it's also a little bit bad because I was looking at Twitter, and Twitter is a cesspool of propaganda and bots, misinformation and disinformation from everybody from Russian propaganda to US propaganda to right-wing propaganda to Nazi propaganda. And it gets very confusing very fast. And not to mention, news spreads super, super fast, and it's hard to validate when a war is taking place. And folks, don't have their cell phones charged in real time. They don't have access to Wi-Fi. Sometimes videos come in later. Not to mention, there in Russia in particular, Putin has cut off access to Western press, to independent press, Russian independent press and media. And if you are caught doing so as a journalist that is not part of Russian state media, you could be sentenced to 12 years in prison. These are dangerous. The West has isolated Putin. The West media has isolated Putin, but he's also isolated himself. And that is my concern today. The global community, the global economic community has come together to put Putin in a very difficult position in which the economy of Russia, just to put this, make this point very clear, is the size of Texas. His funds are not going to last long enough, especially with the EU and the US saying they are no longer going to be purchasing oil from Russia. So this isn't going to last very long, and he's going to start looking for different ways to continue his power to win his war. So he's going to go to his autocratic friends and ask for some support. They may or may not give it. If he is shown to be successful, they may be inspired by his actions and do similar things, invade other countries, to develop this sort of brotherhood of autocrats around the globe to push back against Western capitalism. It's not looking good, though. And I mean, who knows? It seems as if Putin is in a corner, that other autocrats around the world just see too much risk, especially since so many of these oligarchs have had their accounts frozen, and in some cases, assets seized, whether it's yachts in Europe or houses around the world that have been used as cash holdings instead of bank accounts. It's not looking good for Putin. And so this is why the no-fly zone is a big conversation topic right now. The US and the Western governments are looking to Zelensky to lead and will support him to lead the revolution. But I think that they are all very cautious about putting any boots on the ground or further aggressing the situation because Putin has nuclear weapons. And we're not sure if he is a rational actor at this point or an irrational actor. Rational actors, you can predict their behavior. Irrational, you cannot. And if he's up against the wall and he has put all of his energy and his country's resources into invading Ukraine, all for some greater purpose to unify former Soviet states under his autocratic regime, he has put a lot on the line. And if he has no way out, what will he do? And will he take all of us down with him? I think these are the very serious and difficult existential questions that we're facing. And, the last time I think we faced it as society was during Bay of Pigs, was post Bay of Pigs. And I never thought in my life that I would be sitting here thinking about a nuclear threat, but it does warrant a question. And it's definitely humbled me quite a bit in terms of foreign policy commentary and hot takes, because things are too high right now. And I believe in democracy. I think many of us believe in democracy. I don't believe in U.S. imperialism as a path to democracy, but I do believe in democracy. So I do believe that the Ukrainian people are going to do all that they can and are looking for the support to succeed so that they can protect their democracy. And of course, countries in Europe right now are feeling it much more intensely because it is right there. They're right there. Finland is across the water. Folks in Europe, whether it's Poland or Germany or the Baltics, the Baltic region is a geopolitical hotspot right now. Turkey is now flying planes over Greece, exercising, seeing this as an opportunity because folks are distracted by Ukraine. These are serious times, and these are humbling moments. So I'm really grateful to be back with you guys. We're going to focus on Ukraine quite a bit. Thank you for letting me take 2 weeks off. I'm very well rested, sort of. I'm inspired, and I'm excited to kick off. These shows are very important in these moments. So thank you to everybody. If you're not already part of our community, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomi Key Show. And if you don't follow us here on YouTube, please do. Share it live. Tweet about us. Instagram about us. This is how we build out. We know how much this community has been fragmented in the last couple of years. This is a really important time for quality guests and information and experts to come on, because that is how we're going to make sure that we are informed and empowered. The hot take time is gone. That's the way I look at it. So we really do rely on your support. Thank you to everybody who's been here with us for the last couple of years. Join us over at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, and we will be right back with an incredible show. We're going to start off with COVID, because that still is a thing, despite what maybe some of the press want us to, and the government want us to think. We're going to talk about the loosening up of COVID restrictions and whether or not that's really safe in this moment. And then later, we're going to talk about solidarity. It's Solidarity Wednesday. We have a great show with Brad Jenkins, Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding next, and then the one and only Ben Dixon right before we go to our panel with Arun Chaudhary and Rabb. See you in a second. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Oh boy, will we ever get through this pandemic? I think many of us are cautiously optimistic that this could be the end, but I don't know. I mean, I went out today in New York, and it was the first time I've been out where people don't have to wear masks and you don't have to prove you're vaccinated. I don't see the logic in that. I think it's better to be safe than sorry, but I leave it to the experts, and that is why we have experts on. Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding is an epidemiologist and health economist, a senior fellow at the Federation of American Scientists in Washington, D.C., and the chief health economist for Microclinic International. Oh boy, this is an expert. Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So right before I came on the show today, I saw this report out of Hong Kong stating that once again, hospitals are overrun and there are record deaths right now, mostly, they said, at least with elderly, because of the Omicron variant. What is going on? Because here, the wave passed and it's gone. I mean, I guess COVID's done again, right?
Yeah, so here's the problem. Like, we're done with Omicron 1.0, but what Hong Kong's being hit with is Omicron sublineage BA2. And BA2, honestly, it's a horrible name, and it deserves its own Greek letter, because BA1 and BA2, the old Omicron and the new, are more different than the Delta variant was from the original Wuhan strain. That's just how different they are. But WHO says, oh, we don't want to scaremonger. It's okay. We don't need a new name. But it's really wrong, because it is so much different. And it's infectious, much more infectious. BA2 is now 50% across all regions of England. England cases are surging again. Hospitalizations are actually surging again across all regions of England as well. And, it's kind of like you're watching an incoming train, and it's going to be a train wreck. But somehow we're living in this fantasy of, cases are falling. And if cases are falling, that's equal to zero? No, it's not. And in certain ways, there's this fairy tale wishful thinking effect going on that, I'm so tired. We had the Delta and then Omicron and such a terrible, we need a break. Even though cases are down, they're not that low. and we're gonna plateau again. Like US has never actually hit any really low level. We just always gave up at a certain plateau level. It's like, yeah, okay, acceptable number of cases and deaths and hospitalizations. Let's just the rest of us move on. And this is always what's kicking us in the butt every single time. And it's the next BA2 wave is probably coming in April, if not sooner. But people just don't want to hear it. I understand that it's annoying, but it's the virus doesn't care about your wishful thinking or your news cycle.
When we see the deaths that are occurring with this new variant of Omicron, are these mainly unvaccinated people?
So a lot of them are, but I want to point out that in England, almost 90% of every age group has had some either infection or vaccination. Most of parts of England is already kind of like immune in this naive way, but the problem is that it's waning, because not only vaccines wane, but also natural infection immunity also wanes. And that waning happens pretty quickly starting about 3 or 4 months, and especially in the elderly. So, for example, the cases are rising across all age groups in the UK. I'm not even talking about Hong Kong, because Hong Kong just as a side, the death rate right now is so high. It is approaching New York City in April 2020. And it is so high. It is double, triple the all-time high mortality rates per capita that we've ever seen in the UK or in the US. It is Hong Kong just off the charts crazy right now. And same thing's happening with Singapore and South Korea. They're all surging as well. But here in the States, we're still like around 11%. It's crawling up like 3 to 5% every single week. But same thing happening in Canada. It is so bad what is going to happen. And it's a combination of people not vaccinating enough, which is Hong Kong's problem. But even in England, where people are heavily vaccinated, a lot of them have boosters, it's still rising. And I think that's the problem. This waning thing is people have to really think that there's like this expiration. Oh, I was infected, I'm immune. Only for a certain amount of time. Oh, I'm vaccinated, I'm immune. Do you really need a booster? And even with boosters, I always tell people after 10 weeks of a booster, your booster like falls by half in terms of protection against infection. Now, hospitalization, your booster is still 90%, but it still like falls from 95 to 90-ish. Now, that sounds really good, but in certain ways, you flip it around, your risk of being hospitalized, also doubles, from 5 to 10. And so I think really people just have to realize that what they have, the vaccines are good, where we need a vaccines plus strategy. Without this plus strategy, you're always going to play whack-a-mole with another variant. And this is why, masks are so important. Of course, it's annoying. And if you don't want a mask, and make sure you're boosted. And if you're not boosted or masked, I don't know what to tell you. But I think in certain ways, HEPA filters, the beauty of HEPA filters and all these other ventilation is that it doesn't require personal compliance for vaccines, and it doesn't require personal compliance for masks, right? It's almost like it's built into the building or a room, but you just have to make sure you furnish it. And not enough people do that. And I think that's, again, another completely missed opportunity and ball dropped by the CDC to emphasize, this third leg of if you're not boosted, if you're not, masked, you better have HEPA filters. But, the message is completely lost.
What's so odd to me is, okay, so New York, 75% of New Yorkers are vaccinated. I don't even know if that's just one vaccine, 2 vaccine, boosted. I'm not even sure where we are with that.
2 shots. It's the regular 2 shots. It's not the boosted. Boosted is only about a third of America.
Interesting. So Kathy Hochul, when she announced that she was lifting the mask ordinances, I thought, oh, this is great. We're in the middle of winter. Good move here. But then they said, it's okay. Well, maybe if it's just vaccinated, they have some sort of science. They know that there's just a percentage of the population at this point is just not going to get vaccinated despite all the mandates, despite everything. They're just not going to do it. And government has just given up on them. But then they did the whole thing where you can go inside if you're not vaccinated. And that's where I think they're choosing this population and some sort of business mindset over the majority of New Yorkers. I mean, every person I speak to who is vaccinated is afraid now to go inside because they're going to be around people who are unvaccinated. And I feel like that's a decision that is not a smart business decision. You're an economist. I mean, this to me is you're choosing one dangerous path over the other. There's nothing to be lost.
Yeah.
I'm
an epidemiologist before I'm a health economist. And I wearing my epidemiologist hat, I would say that, I can see for certain limited people, there's this, I'm boosted, I have great health care, I can go to the hospital and get Paxlovid drug, which reduces my risk of hospitalization 90%. But I have several messages for people like that. First of all, Paxlovid, there's a global shortage of that drug. Monoclonal antibodies don't work against BA2 that well. Like almost all the FDA has basically pulled all the monoclonal antibodies against Omicron now because except for one or two, they just don't work. And in certain ways, if you don't have any, vulnerable family members and you're boosted, you're fairly okay. But my main concern is everyone has someone who is immunocompromised or vulnerable. Think about obesity, diabetes, heart disease, asthma, some sort of various conditions. If you add them all up, that list of, CDC says there's 20 risk factors. You have to be careful. Like 2/3 or 3/4 of America have this risk factor, right? And even if you think you're healthy, I'm pretty sure a family member of yours has it. So even if I go in a certain restaurant and everyone is boosted, which they're not, and that's the concern, but even if they are, I'm pretty sure someone in their family is not boosted or has an immunocompromise or a high risk factor. And that's the problem. And people don't think beyond themselves. There's a reason years ago we used to have smoking bans in restaurants. It wasn't, because they were smelly or anything. It was that your right to smoke stops at my nose. And it was endangering the wait staff, the bartenders, right? Because secondhand smoke kills. We know secondhand smoke causes cancer, heart disease, mortality, and asthma, just like smoking does itself. So that's not okay. And your freedom, you talk about freedom, but at the same time, you don't have the freedom to drink and drive, just get wasted and drunk and go out driving. You don't have the freedom at all, right? Mm-hmm. But somehow people completely overlook that. You don't have the freedom to not buckle up, even though it's technically a personal choice, but for public safety, you should. And this notion gets completely lost of protecting others around you. Your right to do anything you want in the privacy of your home, great, stops at my nose in a public space. And I think the issue is sometimes there's so much political pressure that, they want to wish it and use the willpower of hope to wish it away, but the virus just does not give a rat's ass about that.
Well, I mean, it's crazy because the tobacco lobby was extremely powerful, and yet, and I'm sure there were some sort of, insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies who were in on that as well, but they did not succeed. Government did finally step up. I mean, this was not that long ago. Granted, there were lawsuits.
Many years. Yeah, I know, but it was over many years. And again, smoking eventually got the stigma of smoke. The thing is, the difference in smoking is, you can smell cigarettes, right? You can't smell the coronavirus. It's completely odorless. And, a lot of the things that makes alcohol, you can smell alcohol, and, it's clearly drunk driving is one of those things that's, very tragic. It's something in your face. But the coronavirus, there's no in your face kind of exposure. The exposure is silent. It's one of those silent but deadly kind of things. And again, it affects a lot of the immunocompromised and the unvaccinated and undervaccinated people. But you can't see that. You don't see that around you. And public health, I always tell people in public health, here's the problem. If it was something, in a hospital, you can see not wearing helmet, sent to the hospital, oh my gosh, look at the brain injury. But in public health, if you built a crosswalk across a pedestrian busy street or a sky bridge, or just added a crosswalk signal, and instead of 5 or 15 people getting killed at the intersection here, no one did. No, there's no one to thank you, right? Because when something public health succeeds, nothing happens. So when you mask, and after you mask, again, against the virus that is odorless, right? Unlike smoking, and then you succeed, no one thanks you that, oh, I went to restaurants, or I went to the shopping mall, I wore a mask, came home, whew, I dodged a bullet. You never know that you dodged a bullet. And so no one really says, oh, thank God I was buckled. Oh, thank God I wore helmets, or thank God. There's no gratefulness for public health intervention. And that's why at the first sign of cases falling, which is, again, this very abstract statistical thing, people will be like, oh, God, okay, come on, just let me have my freedom and let me do what I want. And that just creates this, oh, let me drink and drive again. Oh, let me smoke again, basically, in public. Right.
So what I don't understand is why is the U.S. government, why have they taken these shifts in reporting, the CDC? This to me is like when George Bush Jr. decided to eliminate funding for the EPA and pretend, well, climate change doesn't exist because we've basically wiped out the EPA. Just because you don't report it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I know. The CDC's guidelines recently, we went from high transmission one day, switcheroo late February, on I think February 24th, to a new reporting guideline that eliminates positivity and just puts in instead hospitalization, because that's what we care about all of a sudden, not cases, even though cases fuel transmission that will eventually affect more people, and fuel variants, of course, and long COVID. We're just going to work at hospitalizations as if anything not hospitalizations, barely counts anymore. And so I feel like this CDC new counting method it's this malfeasance, because, by the way, the numerator is how many hospital admissions you have. The denominator is where you live. But in some rural counties in the U.S., there's no hospitals, right? So there is this numerator-denominator disconnect, and some hospitals have some areas have a lot of hospitals, while the people that come there come from various different places. It's a horrible metric. It's statistical malfeasance to use this horrible metric that is unusable in a lot of rural America, and basically allows you to downplay the cases in a lot of places. It is just horrible. And I always tell people, think about it. If hospitals are not full, we don't need helmet laws. Hospitals we don't need seatbelt laws. Hospitals are not full. We don't need drunk driving laws. Hospital not full. Come on, is that any way to manage and protect families and members of our vulnerable people in our society, or kids, to say the least, right? No, you should never create a criteria for public health based on, oh, we don't need to do something because the hospital beds are not full. But that is exactly what we're doing with COVID. But we would never accept that for implementing helmet laws or seatbelt laws. Oh, hospital's not full, no seatbelt, no helmets needed. How ridiculous is that?
I mean, masks in particular, it's it's no loss to anybody. You don't, if you're not vaccinated, wear a mask. Go inside. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill people around you.
Or do outdoor dining. Restaurants need to adapt to outdoor dining, heat lamps. And I think, in the spring, when, it's a little warmer, cases will be lower because there will be less people congregating. But then in the summer, it flips around because it's going to be so hot in the deep south that people congregate inside for AC and close the windows to keep the cool air in again. And so that's why oftentimes we see a lot of this phenomenon. But it's not that hard if you have heat lamps. And if you don't have heat lamps, HEPA filters, stack your rooms up with HEPA filters. I tell my friends, if you really want to have a gathering. But, not everyone can afford HEPA filters, but you can build a Corsi box. You take a duct tape, 5 filters, you build them into a cube. You ever seen these? Like some kids are building them. It's really cool because you can do it for under $40. A simple $10 box fan and 4 or 5 filters, and you can create something that's even as good as a HEPA filter.
It's the fact that we're even having these conversations still at this point is mind-boggling, and I think what's, other than the fact that people are still refusing to get vaccinated or boosted even, and I'm glad that you mentioned that it does have it does wane off. Our government's response is, I think, what's infuriating. And I think my last question is this new variant. What are the symptoms, or how are they different? Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, there's no symptom difference. Most of the COVID are pretty similar. It's not any less severe. It's actually harder to find because the old Omicron, you can use like a shortcut PCR test without sequencing to find it. But some people call this the stealth variant. It's not really stealth. It's just that you can't shortcut find it. You have to slow genome sequencing to find it. But it's just as contagious, if not more. It's about 30% more contagious. The attack rates are higher within families than compared to old Omicron. It's just more infectious, and it has more reinfection potential, as in, even if you were previously infected but, not vaccinated, your protection is not that great, against another infection. And again, vaccines wane, natural infection immunity wanes. You just cannot count COVID is over. I have no pharmaceutical industry connections whatsoever. There's, a lot of people just say, oh, you're just wanting, this is just to feed pharma. No, this is not to feed pharma. COVID is not over because you can't just wish it away. The thing that will wish it away is the willpower to actually implement policies that work, that protect people from infection, not just hospitalization. And so oftentimes we lose sight of stopping infection, especially long COVID. The brain fog, brain damage of long COVID on neurological and other organs is something that actually is going to have a long-term healthcare cost for many, many years that we're not going to immediately see. But down the road, we're going to be like, oh shit, we really screwed the pooch. We really screwed this up. Look at all these people with long-term chronic conditions. And if only we had just stopped the infection in the first place. But by then, it will be too late. And right now, we're trying to scream at the top of my lungs. And it's just an inconvenient truth. It's kind of like climate change. No one wants to deal with it because it's so inconvenient to deal with.
Optimism these times that we live in. So, least you can do is get boosted, folks. If you haven't been already, go get boosted.
Protect yourself, protect your family with HEPA filters, Corsi boxes. Yes. There's lots of things you can do. So please stay safe.
Wearing your masks. Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was a great overview of the state of COVID affairs. Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, we'd love to have you back on. I'm sure there's going to be another variant you could explain to us. But hopefully everybody stays safe and well.
Yeah. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much, Doctor. All right, we will be right back. It is Solidarity Wednesdays. We have the one and only Ben Dixon on, and we're going to be talking with Brad Jenkins about solidarity across the board, what it means for the upcoming elections. Remember that's happening, and how we can all work together in different communities to make sure that we can, because the Democratic Party doesn't seem to be putting that work in. So what can we do? Because it's just too much on the line. All right, we'll be right back after this. right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. It is Solidarity Wednesdays. It's my favorite day of the week because I start off the day over at the Benjamin Dixon morning show. I have a really inspirational conversation, even during these incredibly stressful times. Existential threats all over the place. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. And that is why we decided to do Solidarity Wednesday, because we know that to get out of this, to get through this, it's going to take an extraordinary effort of solidarity. And so our dear friend Benjamin Dixon is here to join us today. What's up, Benjamin? You got a little costume change there?
Yeah, just a little bit. Let me lean my laptop back a little bit. Hey, Nomiki, it's always a pleasure. I love these Wednesdays.
Me too. I'm really also excited because we have a guest today for our Solidarity Wednesdays. He is the acting president of the AAPI fund, Victory Fund, which mobilizes 23 million Asian American and Pacific Islander voters to participate in, that thing, voting, because we believe in democracy, or at least we try to protect our democracy. Thank you so much for joining us, Brad Jenkins.
No, Miki, thank you, Ben. Yo, that theme music, the whole music is so fire. I don't know.
I was thinking it's not mine though. Like that's Nomiki had that produced. Like you're talking about what we just heard. It was brilliant. I love it.
Napoleon the Legend.
Like, does every guest mention how dope your theme music is, Nomiki?
It's so good. Yeah. It's Napoleon the Legend. He is a panelist on our show. He's an amazing activist and hip hop artist, and he did it for us. And I was like, it was like the most moving thing.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was thinking how dope the song was.
Well, I'll let him know. Maybe he can do some more projects. That's like a whole industry. So, Brad, okay, state of affairs right now, not looking great all around. We'll probably touch on foreign policy stuff in a second, but here back at home, I remember in December, I saw an article in the New York Times talking about how the Democratic Party's largest donors were like, hold up now, Biden administration, you're not focusing on protecting voting rights. We're not donating.
Yeah.
And that was the moment I was like, well, things are definitely going to change now if the biggest donors aren't donating because you're not prioritizing voting rights. But that didn't seem to do anything. What's the state of affairs when it comes to voting rights?
Oh, man, it's a tough beat, I will say. And there's been, probably not a surprise, there's been a fracture even among, I live in D.C. Where are you guys at? I don't know where in the country y'all are, if you're in New York or outside the Beltway, but You're in Atlanta. Okay, God bless you. I worked in the Obama administration, so I did wear the Obama hat. But I got this for you, Nomiki. I got my Bernie mug here.
Wow.
Obama
I was an Obama person too, so
yeah, one of the few Obama heads who was all in for Bernie. Look, I think that you're right. I think that there was, I'll put it mildly, I think that there were, as it should be, given what just took place, right? At the end of the day, what took place, and it's going to happen again. It's going to, we could just count on, and I wouldn't even call it a Republican Party anymore. I mean, they are a party of a wannabe a fascist leader. This reality show host. They are 100% going to try to steal the election. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we have not prioritized doing everything that we can to ensure that not even that aside, right? The whole, the idea that secretaries of state, Republican secretaries of state, are going to do everything that they can to ensure that Donald Trump is reelected. That aside, but we already have in place so many barriers for people of color to vote.
That's right.
And we have a majority. We have a president. We have a White House. We have a Senate. We have a Congress. Sorry, I don't know why my phone is ringing. And we didn't do anything about it, I think, as Democrats. I think that there had been, y'all been sounding the alarm. I think a lot of progressives, obviously a lot of our champions in the Congress have been sounding the alarm. And I think that just knowing, and you guys probably know this, but just knowing the sort of the pace and the beat of the legislative push this past year, it was almost like Build Back Better or voting rights.
Right.
There was even a choice. The fact that we were even put in that position just shows how strategically we were not quite not quite aligned as a party. And this is the challenge. Look, this is the fundamental challenge of our party, of the Democratic Party. And I'm someone who, again, I was a Bernie bro, but also I was an Obama bro. I don't know what the hell I am now.
I feel you on that. I'm like, what's going on?
I please tell me. But,
realigning,
there's a real lack of leadership. There's a gap of leadership. And I think that, look, there's a lot of really inspiring young leadership, new folks, right? But when it comes to actually whipping votes, we're still relying on Nancy Pelosi. And so we're still relying on Chuck Schumer. So again, the party still has to, in many ways, defer to them. And so you're right, Nomiki, a lot of their donors, Schumer's donors, Pelosi's donors, were the ones saying we have to prioritize voting rights. Right. And we just didn't see it happen, which is
Ben, you're in Georgia. I mean, this is what I find so impressive, and I think so many other Americans saw this. You didn't wait for anybody to show up and save you. You guys started organizing years ago and did so very effectively and saved our Senate as a result. What's the vibe like there right now? I mean, that is the front lines for voting rights right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that was put into the ground here. A lot of organizations, Stacey Abrams headed up quite a few, the New Georgia Project, Black Male Voter Project, Mundell Robinson. There was a lot of organizations that were on the ground doing the work because they saw what the secretaries of state, particularly Brian Kemp, they saw what he did when he snatched the election away from Stacey Abrams. And so they had to, the gubernatorial election of 2018, they had to put boots on the ground to out-organize the voter suppression. And so where are we now? We're having to out-organize it again, and this is really brings a lot of light to what you're saying, man, about like why people would take their donations away. Because if those donations are being used to out-organize voter suppression and you have the capacity to use legislation to help us out and you don't do it, then why are we using our money and or our manpower, human power to do anything for this party?
Yeah. Yeah, and Georgia's, I want to throw in, I mean, there's nothing more important than Georgia. I feel like it's ground zero right now if we're thinking about these midterms, right? We've got the Senate, we've got the gubernatorial. Just this past election, right? The runoff, the Senate runoff, just to show you, again, if we're talking about Solidarity Wednesday, which I also love, by the way. One of the first things I did when I came onto the Victory Fund was we have to, as communities of color, work together, right? We just have to do it because the resources that our democratic institutions actually spend on reaching and turning out our vote is pathetic.
It's insane.
Just it. And by the way, I think that the DNC would admit to it. I think that
they do. Jamie Harrison's having a fit over it right now.
100%. It's pathetic. And the reality is the only reason Biden is in office is because people of color, particularly in Georgia. The only reason we have a Senate is because of people of color in Georgia. And Asian Americans, our community, I'm half Asian, half Black. So I also view this from a speaking of solidarity, I view this from a little bit of a different perspective. But, Asian Americans are like the scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? If you look at any super PAC, any IE, any campaign, it's like they're spending more on coffee and pizza than they're spending in actually reaching Asian American voters, even when our margins are big, even when we're like 11, 20, 25% of the vote. And in Georgia, we were such a huge, especially in Gwinnett County, right? Huge, mostly Indian American, not East Asians, the South Asian Americans in Georgia. We did a thing, Victory Fund did a thing last cycle where we were able to get some money and invest in data because the data is a disaster, complete disaster in a state like Georgia. The Democratic Party refuses to invest in cleaning up the voter file with regards to communities of color because they say it's too hard. It's too challenging. And again, this is the only way we're going to win. So last cycle, Victory Fund spent a good amount of money just cleaning up the voter file. There were 300,000. You're going to love this, Ben. There were 300,000 voters in the voter file that were labeled as African American who were actually Asian American. And we clean that up. But think about that. Think about all the money being spent, like poured into Georgia in that final, 3 weeks. And they're trying to knock doors and they're trying to do lit. They're trying to do all this like sophisticated, targeting.
Yeah.
And they're sending the wrong community
to
actually turn it out. So, and we wonder why Asian Americans don't vote at higher rates. So we actually, this is a rare thing, but Victory Fund, we put together an MOU with Collective PAC, so Stephanie and Quentin, and then also Latina Victory Fund. So our 3 PACs are actually working together this cycle. So we're going to be raising money together.
Great.
We're going to be investing in data together in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada.
Nice.
The only way we're going to win, because here's the thing, and I hate to say this because I have friends, a lot of friends that work at the DNC. They're not doing it.
They know
They're
it.
not doing it.
I mean,
So
this is.
we have to do it. We have to do it for ourselves.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I'm so glad you mentioned the DNC, because that was where I wanted to pivot, because I mean, I can't even. It's like you could literally, people can repeat my talking points now at this point. It's been going on for like 4 years. Friendly reminder, regular reminder that the Democratic National Committee does not have budget transparency, and the voting members of the DNC wanted it. Jamie Harrison wanted it. They want to know where all that money that those donors are putting into the DNC is going, and why it's not being invested in state parties. State parties are flawed. They won't always operationalize the way that they should, but they're in the community, and they're there to build a pipeline. They know they know their communities. They know that I don't think there's any state party leader, I think that I can be firm to say this, that doesn't want to win, that does want to have
100%.
their candidates win. And if the DNC is just taking this money and putting it into some consultants, for presidential races, it's bad for democracy. And they know that now. I mean, this is what's really getting me. The word is out. Those donors would not have done this if they didn't know that their money was not going to the places that they keep asking for it to go. And we're literally talking about preserving democracy worldwide, and yet we as the Democratic Party can't even put money into the Democratic Party for voting rights.
For data cleanup, no less.
Even just to win elections, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, and the cool thing right now, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to be. I always try to be positive, right? I always try to focus on like what can we actually do? Because at this point, it's March, right? I mean, the midterm elections are right around the corner, right? Primaries are even. I mean, we just had a primary in Texas, so we're voting already. And at the end of the day, all I care about is winning, right? Mm-hmm. So you're right. Like, there are a lot of things that I think this administration, look, I mean, not to sound like a hack, but there are a lot of things this administration did do well, in defense of Biden, given what he inherited. And I mean, I've been living in DC, so we've been living in a state of fascism for the past 4 years. So like anything better than Trump was great. But my thing is like, what are we seeing from the party to show me that they're focused on winning?
That's right.
When it comes to narrative, when it comes to actually saying what the Democratic Party has done for the American people for the past year, I'm not seeing it, right? And I'm not seeing, and we can't wait until a month before the election to start talking about this stuff.
That's right.
Right? Like, we got to do it. We got to do it now. And, I think that's going to be the fundamental challenge. We can't just say, we're not as bad as the other side. Now we're running on a record. We're running on what did we deliver for the American people in these past 2 years, or did we not? Right. And so to your point, Numiki, on voting rights, that was the number one agenda for the community that actually got us in there to begin with.
They didn't do anything.
So, and look, again, I still call me like glass half full, but like, I still think things can be done, right? I think that gerrymandering, I do want to give a huge shout out to Eric Holder and what they're doing in like really fixing a lot of these gerrymandered districts. So give a huge shout out to those guys.
Fixing what they didn't do when they were in the administration.
But at least we're doing it now. I'm always glass half full. At least that shit's happening, right? Yeah. You got to be able to sort of put wins on the board. And I don't know. I mean, look, we have to, I don't know. Like we gotta be able to show to particularly young people of color who don't vote in midterm elections, right? The base of the party, we don't vote. And so we have to be able to show something. And there's still time. These elections are in November, so we'll see.
So Ben, I want to pivot just a little bit, but related to the election, the Ukraine war. I've been told not to say war by media experts, but I'm going to call it a war because he's committing war crimes. So this is my personal decision here. The war in Ukraine has created some sort of solidarity around the left that I haven't seen in the last couple of years. And I hate to already be here, and I feel like I'm CNN being like, what does this mean for the elections? But the truth is this going to be the out for the Biden administration, who can't get all this other work done, who can't get BBB passed, who's had cinema and Manchin holds up everything, who's not passing voting rights or protecting voting rights. And we're seeing all the attacks at the state level against, women's health, the Florida bill right now. I mean, everywhere you look, there's just bad news. But there's one piece of news that is always great for cable news and brings Americans together. It's war.
War.
Is that going to be enough, Ben?
No. Will it be useful? Yes. The reason I say no is because, let's be real, Putin has his hands in the Republican Party, right? And so while they are able to leverage this, the Democratic Party can leverage this war to win. I don't think that they're even going to do that successfully, because I believe, if you can allow me a little bit of my own conspiracy, I think they're dead set on losing, because they're literally doing everything necessary to lose. They're not even explaining that this is an inflation, this is price gouging effectively. They're not sending that messaging out in mailers. They're not running commercials on it. And you know why? It's because those silly consultants over there in the political realm are eating up all that cash, and I can't believe they can't get that African-American Asian distinction right, Brad. I mean, that's a pretty basic data thing. So with that type of behavior pattern from the top to the bottom, Nomiki, I think that they want to lose, because that's what they're doing. They're getting ready to lose.
And there's a lot of obviously contractors who are making a lot of money on both sides who are in appointed positions, without getting too wonky, in the DNC. They haven't been elected, but they're appointed, and they sit on important committees like the Rules Committee. And it's frustrating because, again, this is about democracy. Okay, last, just on Ukraine, I do want to touch on the refugee crisis, because I think we've all seen... We've seen the video footage of refugees, orphans, children. There was a report yesterday by Vlad Dutier on CBS of a child who went 500 miles with his phone number written on his hand and to get to the Polish border, and he's safe now. But it doesn't always end up that way. One of my best friends told me her colleagues had to evacuate Kiev, and the fathers stayed home, and it took them 48 hours just to get outside of Kiev because of the traffic. And then, of course, all the blocks along the way. Add to that, you're a person of color. So I asked my best friend, who has worked in Ukraine twice and is an expert in post-Soviet states, and she said, post-Soviet Union states have a real issue with race. It's not... it's a pretty much white. These are white countries. There's a lot of Eurasian tendencies there and flavors of Eurasian nationalism, and it can be economic progressivism or not conservatism, but there is a lot of Eurasian nationalism, and that has been exhibited in how they've dealt with refugees that are not white. So it seems like it's shifting a little bit, but. Is this enough? I mean, is this conversation, obviously, the Eurasian politics is not something that we're all fluent in, but has it highlighted sort of the discrepancies between how we treat refugees here and abroad? I'll start with you, Brad.
I mean, 100%. I mean, I'm sure you guys have covered the coverage. Have you guys seen that viral clip of the way that they've been talking about the refugees, and even Fox News referring to them as refugees. It's like, oh, are you referring to other immigrants fleeing persecution, fleeing the border as refugees? I don't think you are. No, I mean, you're 100% right, Numiki. This is complicated, right? And I think viewing it from afar, I think I'm reminded by two things that is helpful to level set. One, there's an Afghan refugee crisis right now, right? And Americans have, and there's been some really great work. Speaking of the Biden administration, they've done great work in resettling something like 75,000 Afghan refugees into the United States. But that number is going to increase. Mm-hmm. And we have a challenge right now. We're seeing all these beautiful images of, I'm not sure if you guys saw the Berlin train station, of all these Berliners literally going to the train station with signs welcoming refugees into their home, like literally saying, I will take you. In Poland, the same thing. Like, other countries are doing this. They're welcoming refugees. We have a crisis here in America because no one wants to do that here in America, right? For Afghan refugees. And so there's been a lot of investment from the administration into this organization called Welcome.us, which is working with all of these different civic organizations to actually place Afghan refugees in communities. So they're not in shelters, but they're actually in homes, right? A lot harder to do when they're Black and brown families than when they're, not white, white and blue eyes and blonde hair. With that said, though, Welcome US is actually going to start accepting Ukrainian refugees as well. Mm-hmm. It's just an interesting dynamic that's going to be at play here, because that's going to roll out. And I'm just curious. I think it's, their number one priority is because they know there's going to be another 50 to 70,000 Afghan refugees that they're going to have to accept and settle here in America. No one is bringing this up. That we need more Americans to step up and do this. So it's great. It's great to have a Ukrainian flag. Again, I don't want to cast any aspersions, but it's great to show solidarity in tweets and shares. But at the end of the day, we need, again, corporations, community centers, and actual families. The 1%, right? Again, Elon Musk trying to help people via tweets. It's like, look, there are very real children and very real families that need help. They need resources. They need a roof over their heads right now in America, not in Ukraine, here. And so folks want to help. I mean, like, literally, you could go to welcome.us. You can donate. You can offer to help. If there's a community where Afghan refugees are, they have like welcome committees where you can actually, as they get off the plane or as they get off, you can actually welcome them. This work is happening, and it doesn't have to be, again, I think that's the other big challenge. Refugees all over the world. And so if you've been inspired to act by seeing what's happening in Ukraine, please go to Welcome US and figure out ways that you can help right now. Because you can do it.
Ben, I mean, this is ultimately it. We have the capacity. I remember the beginning of when the Muslim ban took place, all the statistics about, how over the years, we've just been taking in fewer and fewer refugees, not to mention our own border crisis. Let's remind folks.
Yes.
But we have the capacity, Ben. Like, I think about on the left, communities against each other. So in solidarity, I mean, I'm glad that we're talking about these issues, but there has been a lot of conversation sort of pitting one community against another. When it's really, these are the effects of war and economic, I mean, in most cases, war, whether it's brutal situations in Central America or in Afghanistan or Syria or Yemen or Ukraine now. We know, or Somalia. We have the ability, right? I mean, what's it going to take, Ben? Do you have any?
Right? No. I want to just bring into the conversation, like you said, at our border, I'm reminded of how the Haitian migrants and asylum seekers were treated. I mean, America organized really quickly to clear them from the Texas border. One day there were thousands of Haitian asylum seekers there, and then the next morning they were all gone.
Right.
So the American government is extremely efficient at deporting people, but not at processing asylum seekers of a particular melanin count. We see that, and then we have to put that aside here because Ukrainian refugees still need help right now. Because we got to stop war. And I mean, you asked a big question, I have a big answer, because these are people who have been either the direct, they're running away from war directly in their nation, or they're running away from sanctions that have made their country unlivable. They can't find work, they can't feed their children, and so they migrate to find a better life. But it's two examples of what we in the United States contribute to the chaos that we create, at not only at our own border, but borders internationally.
That's right. Yeah. I just got back from Cuba, as you guys know, and I mean, the path from Cuba, 90 miles away from Miami, to go into to Brazil, found a way to Brazil because they could use their visa, because Cubans can only, their visas are only valid in certain countries. Flew to Brazil. Somehow, I can't remember, this one person told me the path into Central America, paid the coyotes, and these are not wealthy Cubans. These are poor Cubans who are affected by the sanctions. I was there for 2 weeks. I saw it personally, how difficult it was to get coffee, how difficult it was to get black beans. Like, these are things that I think are staples in the diet. And, thank God there was very, 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 very cheap for the citizens, but they run out because of sanctions. And you can only survive on the private market if they have it. So a lot of folks didn't want to leave Cuba. And one guy in particular, his daughter was a doctor. She sent her off. She was like, I think 29 years old or something. And she made it through. She went all over the border, coyote over the border into Texas, and made it. I didn't want to freak him out, but it was that was very dangerous. And I don't think she really told the full story to him about how dangerous that path was. So I'm glad you mentioned sanctions too, because that's a big part of this.
Yeah.
Where can we check out your work? How can we support you?
At Brad Jenkins on all I don't really tweet. I feel like Twitter is just eats my soul away every time I go on there. So I retweet. So I'll retweet Ben and Nomiki. I'm on Instagram. I'm on I guess I'm still on Facebook because I'm an old person. But at Brad Jenkins. I'm again huge fan of Nomiki and Ben, what you guys have been doing for years. We need look, here's the way I'll put it, right? Is the stronger and better organized we are on the left, it actually helps our friends on the inside. It just makes their job so much easier when we can hold them accountable. So I want to thank you guys for doing that. And again, for all the work you guys have been doing for so many years. So,
and thank you for doing the hard work on the ground. Very, very
absolutely. It's good to see you guys.
Nice to see you too. Benjamin Dixon, thanks for joining us as usual. Go check out Ben's show. He has the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show and all the different places. And we will see you again next Wednesday. Thank you guys.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We will be right back with our amazing panel. We have Rep Chris Rabb from Philadelphia, and Arun Chaudhary. We're going to do a lot of conversation.
place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
Poland was one of the EU countries that, was hesitant to take in refugees. Talk about what has changed and the different position now.
Now, just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. And that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar.
These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Very excited after my vacation to see my good old friends, Representative Rabb, Chris Rabb from Philadelphia, representing Northwest Philly, and the one and only Arun Chaudhary in what place unknown. Are you in Germany? I feel like that's
I'm actually back in Berlin. I'm in the studio. Yeah. I'm in the studio. And I actually wanted to just quickly check in with Rep Rabb. How did all that turn out? You are in the same district and all this?
Oh, right. Redistricting. Let's update our redistricting
yeah, where do we land
occurred.
On that? Just so that we introduce you correctly. Who knows?
I have been able to retain 85% of my district. And I get to keep my district number, which is 200, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Did you notice how I didn't say your district number? I was like, oh, maybe it's not 200 anymore.
Right. You didn't know what it was. I didn't know either.
That's subtle politicking, guys.
So, yes, it is largely the community I've represented for the past 3 terms. Unfortunately, I am the only House Democrat out of 90 who is forced to run against a fellow Democratic incumbent. So that's a little
feelings will be hurt.
Unfortunate.
But you got most of the districts, so sorry, buddy.
Yeah, there's other ways to serve the public. Everybody needs to remember that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could have a show on YouTube. That's how you do it. You could knock on doors. You could give money. You could do all the things. All right, guys, let's do some comments on that video. It has been making the rounds, a lot of these, the media bias, but in the chat, you had some thoughts and feelings. So lots of media bias about the refugees. Now, I'm of the perspective that refugees are refugees are refugees. So I believe in supporting refugees, especially in a conflict. But the media, clearly shown their bias there. I don't understand. To me, reporters who are on the ground are more sensitive usually to dynamics, but it just seems like I don't know. They're out to let Rep Rabb. You wanted to vomit, so give me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, it's not dog whistle. It's straight up transparency about whose lives they value more based on how they look, who they identify with. And, this is not a surprise to many folks. It is just a reinforcement of, what we see in mainstream media and corporate media, such that it is saying out loud what many folks have been saying quietly, that if these are folks who you wouldn't want as neighbors, even if they were U.S. citizens, you sure as heck don't want them as refugees. And we live in a nation that has extraordinary racial segregation. I actually serve a neighborhood that has been intentionally racially integrated for over 60 years. And we can probably count on 2 hands across this country of 325 million people how many intentionally racially integrated neighborhoods there are. Yeah. So in many ways, this is a reflection of the racial segregation and the mores of a lot of white folk who are feeling a sense of urgency and compassion with folks who who they identify with racially. And they, I think, are very excited to show their humanity to folks who look like them. But that also calls them out for the very same thing about where are they with Yemen and Syria, et cetera.
And I would jump on the top of that, just sort of, we've talked before on the show, the kind of different definitions of racism and how they kind of can creep out in European versus American politics. And I think here we have just a classic, also kind of slippery definition of whiteness that is only defined by people who are in the club. So now we're including, in our World War II fantasy fiction, we're including the Ukrainians in the club. They weren't in the club when they were looking for jobs. When they were in London looking around, so it really, this sort of sliding scale of who is and who isn't in the white club is just Orwellian, the way that it shifts around from day to day.
I've mentioned this earlier in the show. My best friend works in Switzerland for an NGO. We met in freshman year of college studying international relations, and then she really upped it several notches from me. I'm just on little YouTube, and she's actually working in very conflict zones all over the planet. But she's worked in Ukraine twice, and I know you have too, Arun. One thing she said to me when she saw these clips as an American was, she said, the uncomfortable truth that a lot of not just Europeans, there is definitely class and racism in Europe, especially in whiter parts of Europe. When I say whiter, I mean like Anglo-Saxon waspy land. Hope I'm not offending anybody in the global north. Well, I mean, yeah, you would include Italy in the global south. You would include Greece in the global south, but Southern Europe excluded, I guess. So she said to me, she says, Ukraine, post-Soviet states, the uncomfortable truth is there is very aggressive racism there that they have not, because democracy is fairly new, it's the Eurasian nationalism is still deeply in the blood and culture. And there hasn't been a lot of work to really disentangle that from society that maybe other countries, have been working on, are not necessarily successful, but are at least conscious of. Arun, you worked in Ukraine. Do you have a similar sense of this?
I think things are different rather than sort of being like the democratic experiment somehow gives people a head start on this. I think Western and Northern Europe had successfully exported a lot of their racial misery to their colonies. And when it comes to Eastern Europe, you have a place where they had no place to put that. And so a lot of it ends up mixing in of itself. I mean, this is also a place where you've had just such a deep, yes, as you say, sort of deep ethnic sort of xenophobic feelings, I think, during the Second World War and before. You see people weaponizing history on both sides of the line in this way, in a way that kind of belies the fact that this part of the world has been very volatile as borderlands in between often more stable areas become, and that over and over again, we have seen the kind of, whether it is about anti-Semitism or about anti-immigrant activity, we see it being weaponized. You saw in Belarus, Lukashenko literally inviting folks in the Middle East just to use as sort of infantratic bodies to throw against the fence with Poland, right? Sort of in a bizarre move. You see now, folks in Poland, preventing some certain people from fleeing over the border, etc. You see the same thing happening in Russia, and you see people on both sides weaponizing that. They're being super racist, pointing their fingers, and the people who are suffering are, of course, marginalized people.
Of course. So I'm glad that you mentioned Poland, and I know you probably have a lot of thoughts on this. This is so weird. Matteo Salvini, he is the mayor of, help me out here, Arun.
No, he's an MP, but he's the head of La Lega. So he is, the head of what formerly is probably the largest national party in Italy. And then he went to, and it was the mayor of Polanyi.
He visited the mayor. Sorry.
He visited the mayor in Poland. And then, yes, please tell us what happened. This is beautiful.
Oh, no, that's so much. So he's the head of this. And he went to the Poland-Ukraine border, and the mayor of I can't say it.
A typical Polish name to say.
Przemysl shows him the Putin admiring T-shirt he wore while he was in Moscow. So can we enhance that a little bit?
Yeah.
To osoba, którą określa pan jako swojego przyjaciela zrobiła i co tak naprawdę zrobiła tym ludziom, którzy tutaj ilości 50 000 dziennie przekracza granicę. Prosiłbym, żebyśmy wspólnie pojechali. Właśnie pojedziemy zaraz do ośrodka dla uchodźców i pojedziemy na granicę, jeżeli będzie pan w tej koszulce. Zapraszam panie senator. Respectfully. Thank you, sir. You have a chance to condemn Putin right now. Yes.
Grazie.
I mean, is this guy just going rogue?
I mean, I think Salvini took a big chance thinking that something like this wasn't going to happen. And there is some domestic Italian politics to talk about here. So, you know, Salvini, who was the sort of unstoppable right-wing strongman, best friends with Bannon, you know, made La Lega national party, all of a sudden look like he would be the new thing in Italy, suffered a string of 3 electoral defeats in a row. And then just with this presidential election in Italy, had basically everyone not follow him in the right-wing coalition, has really fallen on his face. And I think the only thing a politician like him knows how to do is show up. And so he was like, all right, I have a Putin problem. I need to be able to show up someplace. It was risky. He was like, maybe this works out for me. And I think you could see in his face the sort of sadness. It was like, yeah, this was definitely a 20% chance of happening. And the mayor really had nothing to lose here. I don't think this was even a particularly risky move. It was like, yeah, when that guy comes, I'm going to do this.
I mean, the mayor, though, I mean, Poland, I mean, this is extraordinarily complicated. It's not like the head of state. I mean, maybe that's Poland's way of kind of having it both ways, being part of the EU and condemning Putin, but also having their local leaders show up who have nothing to lose, you know, wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah, against a guy who doesn't have a lot of national power or say in Italy now anyway, but is still a figure. It's sort of a perfect way to get around that without ruffling real diplomatic feathers.
Okay, so this is important. I want to get both of your perspectives on this because Putin, we've talked to reporters earlier this morning. I was on Ben's show, and there was a reporter from Kiev Independent talking about how Putin really hasn't lost his mind. I don't believe that. I think he's always been a little bit off, but I think the difference is now he's unpredictable because he might be forced into a corner. And what happens if he's forced into a corner? I'm not sure if we're already there yet. The fact that I had that perspective and then I read Thomas Friedman's article this morning and an echo that I was like, oh my God, no, this is bad. I don't like where we are right now. Like, let me rethink this. But seeing that and seeing how that even in countries that are going to are aligning and probably will continue to align with the EU and NATO, there are fissures in those countries, larger fissures than say the ones that we have here. Is really in a corner, and you know, will his autocratic friends bail him out? I mean, the economy of Texas, of Russia's the size of Texas. They're cutting off all avenues of being able to continue this war through funds. What's the way out? And his it's almost like the out is the nuclear option, which I hate to say that, but this is exactly what these kinds of scenarios are. Why we practice these scenarios when we're in schools is for these moments. I don't know, Rabb. I mean, politics is politics is politics. Do you see an out for him? And do you think that we're making the right move?
I'm not quite sure. I wish I knew for certain, but this is unprecedented. And our relationship with Russia and Putin will be forever changed. And this is not a drill, right? This is real, and this is the price of imperialism and global capitalism and reliance upon fossil fuels, right? Because this latest ban on Russian imports, that's not to the EU, that's to the US, right? Because we couldn't sustain that if it were just it runs on fracked gas, right?
Right.
There's some level of energy independence that the U.S. can maintain, and so it has to be. This is the inherent challenge with this global market, right? Is that there's an interdependence in the worst ways that double down on all the things we know as citizens, as scientists, are going to destroy the planet. And yet we can't actually put into full force sanctions because our consumerism and our dependence on these things as societies. So if there was ever a time to understand the global imperative to transition to renewable energy and get off of our addiction of fossil fuels, well, it's been we certainly are being reminded right now. But Putin is a sociopath, and I don't know how you reason with a sociopath. And the same with oligarchs. And just as there are Russian oligarchs, there are American oligarchs. So we should not be referring to American billionaires. We should be referring to them as oligarchs as well.
Better branding.
Just like we have to use the same frame across
and they're invested together. I mean, how many of our tech companies have received money from these oligarchs? Whether it's Facebook, a very famous Russian oligarch was one of the early big funders of Facebook, and many other platforms. Real estate all over the world has been affected. We are intertwined with post-Soviet oligarchs who basically seized everything from Russia when the Soviet Union fell and turned it into a mob state. Arun, I want to get your thoughts, but I also want to play this clip about the nuclear dynamic, because it's just, I can't believe we're even discussing this at this point in society, but maybe we should have been for much longer. Let's play this clip.
There's been a lot of corruption. It's a lot of hollowing out. One thing we should be very, very wary of and aware of is that in these military reforms Russia has been undertaking in the last few years, they've incorporated tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. They've integrated that into their military doctrine. These are lower yield nuclear weapons that can be used in the battlefield quite early on into conventional warfare. My fear is the more his conventional forces are shown up as hollow, demoralized, underfunded, the more that option becomes a viable one in Putin.
Arun, you're there in Europe.
Yeah.
Tension. You can probably feel the tension. You can probably feel Putin's breath on your neck right now. How much is this weighing on your mind?
I mean, I think like generally having lots of tactical small nuclear weapons around, someone eventually uses one when they feel like they need to. And it's hard to sort of pin that on exactly where in the world it will happen. But that's what will happen, right? A very small regional thing. And then we'll see if the world freaks out or if they don't, right? They're like, yeah, it was a small one. And actually, if you look at it, it was worse than the firebombing of Dresden, or whatever comparison, thing will start to happen. But I do think the sort of ratcheting up of the rhetoric, and I'll pull this back into answering the last question at the same time, is part of the thing and is sort of part of the pressure tactic. Because as much as sort of on Twitter, or, everyone yelling "Hail Ukraine" or whatever, I think the Putin, especially Lavrov, and these sort of experienced folks over there really do see where the fault lines are in Europe and see where those things are. And it's not just petrodollars. A lot of it is, for sure. But we had this exact same conversation when I think, Nomi, you mentioned in a hopeful way, I heard there's just going to be this global tax, a global sales tax, or a global, that sounds great. How is that all going to work? And it's like, well, it's not going to work because everyone in Europe gets their carve out. Already, once we're past this initial crisis phase, you have seen the different European countries ask for special carve-outs in sanctions. The Italians would still like to sell handbags to the Russians, please. The Dutch would still like to handle, fresh flowers. Everyone has their special thing, jewelry for other people, diamonds, like everybody has something. And by the time you're done picking away at this about everybody's interests, you realize that as much as we do have, right, this kind of cold warriors trying to fight a bipolar situation in a multipolar world, even as all of that confusion is happening, that somehow on both sides of this, we see the same companies.
Well, we see the same companies, but I mean, right before I came on today, I was watching a report on the list of companies that have decided that they are no longer, they're divesting, they're boycotting, whatever the relationship, disentangling themselves from the Russian marketplace. In many cases, this obviously affects civilians. We're going to have somebody on who's a Twitch streamer who can't access her Twitch funds from Russia, and she can't be openly critical of Putin because she could go to jail for 12 years, but she can't access her funds through the marketplace right now. And not to mention that the ruble is worth less than a penny. So, there's the effect on the citizens of Russia, whether they support this war or not. But there's also different types of relationships. So in this segment, I saw discussing the different companies. Each of them have decided to divest in very specific ways. Some sort of like
super specific, right?
Yes, exactly. Like completely pulling out, temporarily closing, Details. I mean, it's the sausage, right? It's the sausage and the optics. But regardless, it's still pressure, right? They're still trying to pressure as much.
There's an enormous amount of economic pressure coming down on both Russia and Belarus right now. Absolutely.
And where do you think it's going to go?
I think it does. I don't think it leads towards enough of an instability to destabilize the Russian government. I think a lot of people are kind of looking for that to happen. I don't think that's what happened. I think, I often talk about the number one, lever in political communication is not outrage or fear; it's loss aversion. But the trick is, that's why inflation is so sticky, right? My money's worth a little less today than it was yesterday. Like something's happening and I can't control it. But also it happens with dignity. And I feel like the communications war that you see happening now is so much about dignity and not about these economic hardships and coming through it that it is sort of painting a different narrative. And I think this is really a communications war being fought not on Twitter or on Facebook and the places where we're used to seeing it, but it's being fought on Telegram and places where, folks in the region are much more often. And it's incredible to be subscribed to different sides, different Telegram channels during this war and to see the exact same clips with different captions. Like, the kind of just amount of information being put out in real time, disinformation putting out in real time, counter information to the disinformation put out in real time. We are seeing something happening here, something that is very real.
I mean, the day of the attacks, or like the day after, I opened up my Telegram and it was like 30 new people had signed up. A good chunk of them do work actively in democratic politics. That was very interesting to see. Rep Rabb, think there's a way out? Where do you think this goes?
I just remember being, how old was I? 30 years old at the German Marshall Fund. I was an American Marshall Memorial Fellow, and I was one of 18 Americans between the ages of 28 and 40 who were traveling across Europe for a month. We traveled to 5-6 countries and learned about their different political, cultural, economic systems. This was right before 9/11. So this was, wow. This was a long time ago. And I had never been to Europe before. And it really dawned on me how both international and insular Europe is, how in close quarters folks are, how much history there is, how much the borders mean in terms of national identity and the complexities and nuances associated with nationality, and what it means to be European, and what were the proxies for Europeanness, and who should be allowed in NATO. And I know Turkey was like, and a lot of this was around whiteness that was never talked about. And I remember asking folks when I was in, I'm trying to remember, I think I was in Prague. I asked multiple times. I wanted to meet some Roma community members. And they're like, why the hell would you want to meet those people? Totally. They just looked at me like I had misspoken, like I was crazy. And I'm like, I'm Black. Of course I want to meet them. And they were just shocked. And some of the Roma folk who I met were shocked that I asked to meet them. They're like, what's this about? And it just reminds me of how fragile all of these things are, these relationships, these dynamics, and how it influences everything. And I don't know how we're going to come out of this, but we will not be the same. And what I'm hoping for is that more conversations like this happen, because we have this thing where people just jump on the bandwagon and say, we're with Ukraine. And I get it. They need our support. But all refugees, all victims of imperialism and all the isms, militarism, etc., they all need our help. And we need to understand how they're all connected. And by being silent about some issues and loud about others tells a lot about us. And we have to do better. And that conversation is not going to be led in corporate media. It's going to be led by folks like you and folks on the front lines, so that we can have a higher level of civic literacy, so that we don't buy what the corporate duopoly is talking about in Congress, and also what they're trying to sell us on mainstream media.
I think that's so well said. I think that, like, you know, the real trick is to be able to have the real debate, which is so important, about what a multipolar world is going to look like, and how to have just outcomes in that world. But we can't do that with the media continuing to be able to just dump these jingoistic tropes on us. It all feels so familiar. You know, we're all old enough now to have done this a few times, and it's like, whoa, this is what it feels like to get old, huh?
If all that comes out of this is Russia bad, we've lost.
Yeah, Tolstoy bad. That's all we're gonna get. Yeah.
Tolstoy bad. Yeah, banning Russian literature. Not what we're looking for here, guys. I do want to recognize my grandmother, because she was a refugee, and my whole family was. But she passed away on March 4th, 2017, and her funeral was March 8th, if I believe, 2017, and it was International Women's Day, and she was the matriarch of the family, who brought in multiple refugees. She was from Albania, so when the wall fell, hundreds of family members she took care of. But on the day of her funeral, when we were speaking, was the day that the Trump Muslim ban went into effect, and it was, you know, here we are 5 years later, and having the same conversation. So I when I see refugees from wherever, I think of my grandmother. It didn't matter. They'd come into the church, whether they were Somalian, Orthodox members of the church, she would take them in, and you know, it doesn't matter. Just once you have
no
that
means testing, right?
No means
Come on,
testing.
folks. We can do better than this. Yeah.
Well, also, if you come from that, there's a sensitivity to it too. So, you know, that's why I was really shocked by these reporters who've been around so many different situations, and to be that numb. Yeah, I guess it dehumanizes you too. Rep Rabb, good luck at your speech.
Thank you. I was supposed to have attended. I wanted to attend a rally about 75 miles away. The great folk that shut down Burke's coalition had a rally at the Immigrant Detention Center in central PA, and our Democratic governor has not acted on trying to shut it down. And I think it's important to say that, you know, this is not just an international issue. There are people among us who are asylees, who are refugees, who need support, and we have to understand the apparatus in which they're caught up in that transcends Trump, that was furthered under multiple administrations and fomented under the Clinton administration, where we have mass deportation, when we have criminalizing of Black and brown immigrants. These things are at the core of all the sickness that we are embracing in this nation, and we can't make this a partisan issue. This is so much bigger than that. And if we make it Trump bad, therefore we let everyone else off the hook, and we remove the historiography and the genealogy of all these decisions that continue to plague each new marginalized community. So we have to do ourselves a solid and learn about how all of this is interconnected, to figure out what is the one thing I can do back at home, because we all feel so helpless so often. What can we do? And it could just be helping those in need who are in our own backyard, who suffer from the same systems of oppression.
Well said.
Yeah.
Arun, final thoughts?
No, I just hope a good discussions like this, because there is a principled, anti-war stability and sustainability plan for this planet. And when it's the only way to stop war is to build a coal plant, I sort of feel like I don't have a lot to go on there.
Yeah. Stay safe. I'm just going to say this. Stay safe. I don't know what you could do to stay safe. But when people say that, I'm just like, you're like, great.
Find a way and do that.
Yeah.
Get underneath your desk the way that they did in the 50s, because that surely was going to work.
This is as a nice heavy desk. And of course, Oscar the Puffin will be with me.
You're protected by Oscar. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for a fantastic show. Great conversations, great guests. Always appreciative. I'm glad to be back and here with you guys. Rep Rabb, good luck. Arun, good night, because it's very late there. Thank you to you all. And I want to give some shout outs to our patrons. We've got some new patrons here. Oh my goodness. Token T. Token T. I love how you wrote it. Thank you so much for your pledge. And Robert E. Lee, a new patron also. Robert, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. See how programmed we are? Robert E. Extra love there. Robert E. Thank you so much. And Richard S. double pledge. Oh my God, thank you. David H., so grateful to you. John C. and Daniel S., so much love to you guys. Thank you for patronizing us. This is, as you know, how we roll. You too can become a member if you join us at patreon.com/The Nomi Key Show. If you were once a patron and want to join us again, let us know. If you can't afford or need to take some time off, let us know. Email us at thenomikeyshow@gmail.com. If you want to sponsor other patrons, that is an incredibly generous thing to do and goes a long way. We are independent media, as you know, so we don't have all the big bucks coming in. We have to do this on our own time, our own way. We're a tight team. But I think we do good work. I think we might be a little bit better than some of the very well-funded shows out there. We try to get incredible guests, experts on, and have deeper conversations about complicated issues that you can't just hashtag. That's what you get with us. So thank you to everybody. And as usual, stay in solidarity. We will see you on Friday.
The Nomi Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomi Show.